Hello, I'm Deborah Malone, founder of The Internationalist and host of Internationalist Marketing TV. Today's guest is Thomas Burkhardt, CMO and Senior Vice President of Global Brands, Marketing, and Design at Marchon Eyewear. Thomas, welcome to the show. It is always a pleasure to see you, whether virtually or not. I think that we're going to have a very interesting conversation today because we've known each other a long time, and I'd love to explore two issues which I think are very much related. One is some of the work that you're doing for a very important mid-sized company, but also how that can translate into sustainability. So again, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Well, look, let's jump right in. You have worked for some of the world's largest companies and some of the world's biggest marketers. And now you're the global champion for a portfolio of brands. Mm-hmm. How would you compare the two? Because I'm sure a lot of other marketers are also wondering about that balance.
Yes, thank you. It's a good question. They're very different experiences, but they have a lot in common. Yes, as you mentioned, I had the benefit of obviously working for Procter & Gamble for the first kind of half of my career now, for large global brands, the multi-billion-dollar brands, global brand manager for brands like Pantene, Herbal Essences, ran the Hugo Boss fragrance portfolio there. Then I worked for Coty, which is a leader in the beauty space, running their biggest brand, which is House of Calvin Klein Beauty there. And obviously, those are, you're kind of in the Premier League of marketing, both in the training you receive, but also in the resources you have at your disposal. And obviously, it's almost mind-boggling that, if I look back, 3-4 years in a company, and then somebody gives you $100 million budget to play with. Somehow I got away with it, but then at some point in your career you think, you know what, actually maybe being in a smaller company, being part of not only a leader in the market for the marketing function, but also being part of the leadership of an entire company could be very interesting. And this is how I ended up here at Marchon Eyewear. Marchon Eyewear is I always describe it as almost like an ideal state, because we're a small company, but we're big in an industry. And that's a good place to be, because the eyewear industry is relatively visible, because a lot of us wear eyewear, me included, be it sunglasses or optical, and it's a small handful of companies that are really very dominant players in there. Marchon is the only US-based behind this, biggest US player, and one of the top 3 eyewear manufacturers in the world. But on the other side, we're still, we're a mid-sized company, 2,300 employees. We're global, yes. We have 24 subsidiaries around the world, a couple of regional headquarters. But it's still, if I look at, the people I interact every day, it's a small management team. We're 7-8 people. We can make decisions fairly quickly, and everything that comes with that. And part of the difference that I've experienced in here compared to my previous really B2C focused FMCG life is eyewear is a very specific and particular industry. So on the one side, it's what you mentioned, the portfolio of brands. So managing over 30 brands as part of our offering. And the majority of them is licensed. I had licensed brands experience before, and actually there was a point in my life where I told myself never work for a licensed brand again, because in the end you're not the final decision maker. But I can tell you it's a lot easier, a lot more fun working with 23 licensors than working with just one, because there's always some that some that are nice and make your life easy and you have fun with, and that helps to compensate for maybe some others where times are a little tough. But no, coming back to it. It's the portfolio piece, and then the other piece that's very particular to this industry is also, it's a very unique mix, because on the one side there's fashion, and that's something I knew about, coming from the fragrance world, working with some very large fashion and apparel houses, but it's healthcare at the same time. We're the optical market, many people don't understand, but the optical market for optical eyewear is almost more than double the size of the market for sunglasses, and it's growing because more and more people need vision correction. And while the DTC part is growing, it's still relatively small. And the vast majority of what our products that we're selling and the services that we're offering going through medical professionals, opticians, eye doctors, and those are people we're dealing with. So I had not only to learn, what it means to work in a smaller company, what it means to work with a portfolio of brand, but also there's a very strong B2B component, and that really creates a very interesting and fulfilling role. I've been in this for now over six and a half years, can't believe it. And it's still good fun every day. The challenges evolve, and I can apply what I've had before. Coming back to the original core of your question, comparing to, as I say, different experiences, but at the end, and that's probably also the benefit of my good old P&G upbringing. You have to remind yourself, what is this all about? And at the end, it's about similar things. It's about understanding the consumer, understanding their needs, how an industry is meeting, serving their needs or not serving their needs, what barriers they have to using our products, and then what benefits can we provide? How can we make sure that we have relevant brands that are relevant to them? And how do we provide value to them? And that is the same whether you're selling shampoo, whether you're selling fragrances, or whether you're selling eyewear, optical eyewear, sunglasses. So if you remind yourself of those principles, there are actually quite a lot of similarities.
Now, it's interesting that you say that because, yes, that not only does that sound very much like someone who was trained in the P&G School of Marketing, but you're absolutely right. I mean, that is the strategy of marketing. It's to provide benefits. And there's so much that I would love to talk about. But one thing, speaking of how challenging your job must be, not only, as you say, is it balancing the B2B and the B2C side, but in addition to your portfolio of brands, I recall that you have your own brand with Flexon, because I do remember several years ago that it won one of our awards for just the extraordinary creativity that it used to show how flexible Flexon was, and it was a wonderful, wonderful program that you did, and I think it was one of the first, and it was so satisfying to see that. But how then do you balance the needs and the benefits of marketing your own brand, and then some of the very high fashion licensed brands? I mean, do each of them have different issues and different needs, or do you somehow figure out a way that they can be unified?
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. That is kind of the crux of what me and my brand management team are trying to achieve. So we have, just to put our viewers, give them some little background, as I mentioned, over 30 brands. 23 of those are licensed. I think 8 or 9 are now proprietary, as we call them. I don't like the term house brands because it sounds like house wine. Actually, they're real jewels. The licensed brands, I mean, we're very lucky, again, being one of the leading eyewear companies in the world, being the biggest US player in the field, truly global. We have some world-class brands that trust us with their eyewear businesses. Brands like Nike, Columbia, Converse, Calvin Klein here in the US, Lacoste, Salvatore Ferragamo, Marchon, etc., etc. It's a long list. So really a portfolio that helps us to really meet consumer needs in all geographies, in all value points, etc. Our proprietary brands play a very specific role because our proprietary brands are not really trying to compete with those brands. Because a Nike is a Nike, a Salvatore Ferragamo, Lacoste is a Lacoste. Again, they're iconic global brands that have incredibly talented people working behind them and making sure those brands have relevance, they're evolving, etc. And we're a strong and reliable partner to them, integrating as much as we can and kind of working with them in sync. Also sometimes it's nice not having to worry about, the next campaign, and there's people doing that for you and doing this really well. So we're very privileged to do that. Our proprietary brands have a very specific role because at the end, the bulk of our business, over 2/3, is in the optical space. As I mentioned before, we're working directly with opticians, with OD, with eye care providers, to make sure that they have the right assortment, the right offer for their customers, for their clients that need vision correction. And in vision correction, brand is, I wouldn't say it's not a priority, but there are other priorities there. And it mostly is fit, does it work for my budget? Is it does it overall look good on my face, etc. And then if it comes from a nice brand, that's nice as well. And there's certainly also some technology and innovation that plays in that field. And this is actually where we figured out that our proprietary brands can play a role. So how can we provide our customers in the first place, i.e. the eye care providers, the opticians, the optical retailers, with brands that fill certain gaps in their portfolio? And that's where our proprietary brands come in. So I don't expect, as you mentioned, Flexon, which is our biggest proprietary brand, it's been around for 30 years, based on a memory, very, quite unique memory metal, titanium technology, where effectively you can, drive over a frame or drop it from a high rise and it will still retain its shape or fall back into shape. That's a very unique benefit, and it's a brand that's centered around this. There's a customer that is looking for those benefits. Either they lead a very active lifestyle, or they're just clumsy, and therefore, they've come to trust a brand like Flexon that is providing value and benefits. And literally, we get emails, we get Facebook posts from customers telling us, "Hey, I've had the same frame for 12 years, and it's still not broken. I guess it's time for me to update, or it finally, cease to exist, and can I get the same thing again?" And then they're disappointed that we're not offering the same frame from 12 years ago. So again, so coming back to these proprietary brands, very specific needs, and we have some others like Pure, which is a brand that's all figured around lightness. We have Skaga, which is very exciting. It's just relaunched. It's a brand. It's a brand that's centered around Scandinavian design and has sustainability at its heart. I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more. And obviously, the challenge there is the challenge, but also the fun there is these are our brands. We can do whatever we want. We're the brand builders. There's no licensor that does the campaign for us. So we need to develop the insights. We need to make sure it's around. We need to develop the campaigns. We need to develop the assets that are related to this. And this can be, again, can be a challenge, but it's also good fun. And obviously, being brought up as a brand builder, this is, I wish I could do more of this. Luckily, I have very capable teams that are are very experienced in understanding the marketplace and finding the specific needs for those brands.
No, it's wonderful. It also makes your job sound like a lot of fun, but also juggling so much. And you made a very interesting point about your transition to a global mid-sized company, and that you said that it's a smaller management team, which I know pulls you in a lot of directions. But it also, I think, makes you feel that you're able to accomplish so much more. There's a win and a lose with all of that. But before we get into some of that, I know that you've been an advocate for our industry association, the ANA, in that you've been suggesting, and I think that it has finally occurred, that there had to be a special interest group, a special committee that looks at the needs of mid-size and smaller companies. And you mentioned a couple of things at the beginning, that here you were, a young person at P&G, and with $100 million budget to play with, and the kind of training and the kind of resources you have. Now, what happens, and I'm sure this is what your advocacy was about, but what happens then? How do small and mid-sized companies manage? And talk about that, and why you thought it was so important to have an interest group, a committee based on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a long time coming, and finally, as you referenced, we have a standing small mid-sized company subgroup in the ANA, a big supporter of the ANA, obviously, for many years. It's a really a source for good in the industry. But this small medium mid-sized company, it's like it's a bit of a self-help group, because there were a few of us that were sitting at incredible events like the ANA Masters and listening to the CMOs of Anheuser and Burger King and large insurance companies or Vodafone, and you're saying, oh, this is all well and good, but how do I translate all those things that you did with an army of people and gigantic budgets into what I'm doing? And we finally got there. So this is a group now that meets fairly regularly. We even have subgroups within there, and some very interesting leaders come out of there. Luckily, there are a few like me that have both the big size company experience as well as small mid-size. So we can also bridge sometimes the understanding. It's a lot more difficult, obviously, if you never had that kind of background. listen, there are pros working for a small company. And that's what I was looking for. Smaller company. That's what I was looking for. It's a lot more agile. What we're doing. It's a lot more entrepreneurial. We're much faster decision making. I mean, it's a phone call or now a Zoom or MS Teams meetings, and 3 people get together. We make a decision. We move on. Well, the risk is with us, but it is it's quite refreshing, and that allows you to do things definitely in a more, as I say, more entrepreneurial way than if you in one of the large powerhouses. There's also often not the risk of data paralysis or overly analyzing and not making a decision. Often we don't even have the data, to be honest. And the nice thing also, and I think that was particularly for me also, if you come from a solid background, if you have had the opportunity to enjoy world-class training, coming to smaller mid-sized companies, also you see fairly quickly what the low-hanging fruits are. And then I think it's a skill to reapply. You can't use the same tools necessarily that I had, for instance, at P&G, where I could call in, for instance, an army of world-class media experts to overhaul my entire brand media review. But there were some low-hanging fruits where you just apply the same principles and affect a change fairly quickly. The downside is obviously you have very different or very limited resources. There are very few experts in that sense. Everything is, marketers have to be a lot more all around here. And linked to this is also the access to talent. It's gotten a little better, and certainly to a degree, COVID has even helped, because we now certainly have access to talent, from all around the US, since we also moved to a hybrid and partially remote model. But talent, this is one of the key headaches that I hear also in the small mid-sized community. Building talent, giving talent the right experiences, making sure that also you retain talent to give them the opportunities. And with that, provide them with the opportunities there. The risk is higher in smaller companies because yes, you can, if you work for Unilever or Burger King, you can probably get away with making a mistake that costs the company, I don't know, $5-6 million. You can't do that if you work for a company that would mean a large part of the EBITDA being erased. So you have to be cautious at the same time. But it's finding a balance. But again, similar to what I said prior in the previous answer, how can you use the same principles? How can you learn from those larger companies? But how can you translate that into something very actionable for companies of that size? And that's something I'm personally enjoying. But it is not always as easy as, again, calling up the experts or bringing in the cavalry from the side. It's rolling.
No, I'm sure. I'm sure. But I think, though, that's why smart marketers like to often take the direction that you did at a certain point in their career, because you do have the ability to see these things. But usually you've been exposed to enough innovation and enough ways of getting things right that you can, even with less resources, have a sense of what can be the right direction. And that's got to be thrilling.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you one example, because you mentioned it before, the Flex On campaign that, great, you won an award with the Internationalist. As I say, Flex On is memory metal. It claims that are indestructible, and by the time I arrived, the brand was off from chasing some kind of lifestyle targeting. And my first question is, why don't we talk about the key benefit? And out of a joke, it's like, why don't we try to destroy a frame and see how that works? And there's also the benefit of having an in-house agency, which, by the way, is another benefit of also mid-sized company where you have the scale to be able to afford this. I think it took us 6 weeks to develop that campaign, where you saw it, where we tortured our eyewear in any shape or form, riding motorbikes over it, high heels, stepping on them, cars, sledgehammers, a vice, etc. And while legal wasn't too happy about it initially, but they eventually they definitely kept it straight, and everything you see there is replicable. It would have taken 3 times the time, and I think also 3 times or more, 5 times the money to do that, and we could do something fairly quickly, and it was good enough. And that's something I think that you have to ask yourself also for a smaller company: what's good enough to succeed?
Well, no, that's interesting because I think that all of us would agree we'd like to get 10 B plus projects done as opposed to waiting for the one perfect A rated one. And I think that's a reality of the speed of business now. Speaking of the speed, I'd like to transition a little bit at this juncture to something that I'm very passionate about, but you also alluded to it, much to my surprise, earlier on when you talked about one of your proprietary brands with Scandinavian design and also sustainability built in, because that might be a starting point for us. But one of the things that I found so interesting was when I looked into your Eyes on Tomorrow campaign. I was absolutely shocked at the level of sophistication and so many elements that you had thought about in terms of the concept of sustainability, particularly with eyewear. And first of all, it's a wonderful name, but it's also from biodegradability to all of the elements that consumers want. And it also demonstrates quite profoundly that if a company, regardless of size, cares about these issues, they can authentically figure out a way to do it for their industry and for their brand. And I think I've said enough. Why don't you talk a little bit more about it, explain to the viewers and the listeners what this is about, and then I might have a few more questions for you.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, this was actually a confluence of 2 developments coming together. On the one side, yes, we've been looking at ways of making our products in a more sustainable way for quite some time. And I tell you, when I started here, this is not too long ago, this would have been a very difficult compromise, because so many ways of doing, eyewear, which is, often plastic based, or, materials, acetates that have certain, resins in them, etc. Anything that we looked at was, double the price, 3 times the price. And that would have been a very difficult thing to, get the consumer to understand, because eyewear is, on the one side, a very personal product, because you wear it on your face every day. And obviously, you want to make sure. And again, it's a medical device, also an optical. We want to make sure it's hypoallergenic and all of these. But it's not necessarily something like a plastic water bottle that is very, very obvious damaging to the environment. And most people keep their frames a number of years, and instead of throwing them away, they usually also go into a drawer and then rest there for the next 20. So we were looking at this for quite some time, and the nice thing was that finally, also through nudging and we're collaborating, in some cases also making some small investments with vendors, we got to a point where suddenly those materials became not only as pricing as relevant, but also in terms of quality, almost indistinguishable to the traditional materials. And there was a tipping point, I think, around about 4 years ago, when suddenly this became, this wasn't a question of should we do it, but almost why are we not doing this now, and make sure our products are made out of the most sustainable materials. The other thing that happened at the same time is Marchon is part of a larger corporation, which is VSP, which is the world's biggest vision insurer, vision care company. And I was part of a team that worked on a new purpose for VSP that also became the purpose for Marchon. And it's very simple. We call it, it's empowering human potentials through sight. And it has different elements in, but on the other side, on the one side, sight is such a superpower that we enjoy, but we generally only realize when it's not there, or when it's diminishing how important it is to us achieving our own potential, but generally also how humanity is achieving its potential. So there's a lot in there. There's a lot of people centricity in there. As I said, there's the enablement in there, but also empowering human potential society has also something that's very forward-looking, that looks into the future. And again, if you make this your purpose, you look into the future, you look at what we're doing in sustainability. And by the time the purpose was developed, we already had a significant number of sustainability products actually in the market without us even talking about it in a big way. We felt, this is probably the time to give this all a frame and a framework, because not only we internally wanted to look at it, we also saw increased interest from our customers, from our licensors even. I mean, so many of the major fashion houses or lifestyle houses or performance houses we're working with were increasingly interested in sustainability. And whenever we brought this topic up, I mean, I saw ice lightening up, and this topic was suddenly dominating the conversation. So around about 2 years ago, we created so we took all the initiatives that we're already working on and put them under one platform. You mentioned it's Eyes on Tomorrow. Very happy with the name. And again, I think something that we came up in 24 hours, trademarked it, or made sure, and benefit of being a small company. And Eyes on Tomorrow really is a platform for us internally and externally with 3 pillars. There's Eyes on Tomorrow for eyewear, and that's pretty much what I talked about before, where how do we make our frames, our product in a more sustainable way in everything we do. And it's mostly around the materials. It's around the lenses, it's around the packaging. So direct impact of that product. At the same, making sure it still has the same quality, there's still longevity, doesn't, it continues to be hypoallergenic, etc. And there we have made some major progress, as in, for instance, we now replaced all our plastic there was previously fossil fuel based plastic with plastic that's generated from renewable resources, mostly castor beans. That was an easy decision to make, and across our entire portfolio, all the way up to luxury brands. That's now the way we're operating. Then we have the second pillar, which is Eyes on Tomorrow for our supply chain. And this is everything with related to our factory, to our logistics network. And this is linked to packaging, linked to obviously trying to use the least environmentally impactful ways of transport, etc. Make sure our factories has solar panels, etc. All these things that you can do. And in many cases, they're small efforts. It's certainly nothing we did overnight, but again, it's not a question should we do it, it's just more a question of when we do it and how we do it in the best possible way. And then the last thing is, and that was something, again, it's not new, we've been doing this for quite some time, we call Eyes on Tomorrow for our people, because if you have a fully integrated CSR strategy, you also need to look at your teams, not only your teams, but also your stakeholders and the communities we're working with. Good example, for instance, is together with our parent company, VSP, we run a program, Eyes of Hope, where we actually have mobile vision clinics that are touring the country, setting up shop in underprivileged areas and providing people, in many cases, children, with the first time in their life with vision correction services. All our employees getting fully paid days off to volunteer in those clinics, and that is one of the most motivating things. We've seen, I mean, not to exaggerate, but we've seen children being labeled as, maybe not the smartest with bad grades, and it turns out, they were going to school for 3-4 years and they just couldn't see what's ahead of them, and suddenly they're getting glasses, and boom, and because nobody ever bothered to bring them to an eye care professional. And we're not only doing exam, also we make sure they have obviously then the glasses, they have the repeat visits, etc., and they have the vision correction. So that beautifully folded under this. It's been, the reaction has been astonishing. So again, a lot of little efforts that we didn't pull together. We appointed an internal marketing director that also kind of made sure the messaging was there. And I think I've never seen as much engagement behind a company initiatives than behind this. I'm literally, every time we're doing monthly updates with our global leadership team, which is around 150 people, if I don't give a sustainability update, there will be the question at the end. And what about sustainability? What have you done this month? So we have a quarterly newsletter internally that we're not only sharing with our own employees, but we're also sharing with our customers, we're sharing with our licensors. We have great collaborations, not only with licensors, but also with many of our vendors. Eastman, for instance, which is one of the main companies for acetate. They now come to us whenever they have a new product, a new sustainable material, and in most cases, I think the last 7 or 8 initiatives they had, we were the first to market with them because they know that we have such an energy and willingness to do this. So yeah, a lot of energy behind it, behind our group of stakeholders. At the same time, it hasn't decreased our profitability or our ability to invest, because we're doing it in a way that is also financially responsible. And it is really a great signal to the market and our customers and the end consumer that they can actually buy a product that is more sustainable and still gives them the great quality, the value, design, everything behind it. So it's been good fun. And it was something, particularly through the dark days of COVID, that kept a lot of people very engaged, which was nice.
Now that's a wonderful story, and I hope we get a chance to talk a little bit more about it, because I think it's things like this that you talked about talent earlier, and I think it is initiatives like this that attract people to companies that they feel that they have a hand in living a little bit more meaningfully, and doing something that is wonderfully supportive. You talked, interestingly enough, about how you were on the initial team to help with statements of purpose for VSP. And would you say that that these were very much aligned, or that one engendered the other, or it was kind of a coincidence? Or are these now the purpose and the sustainability, are these really the pillars of the company that unify the whole portfolio?
They are. It works beautifully together. It's also, our parent company has taken a lot of inspiration from what we're doing through Eyes of Hope in terms of CSR, because obviously for an insurance, it's not as straightforward as making biodegradable frames. So you have to look at it from a different angle, but no, it lives beautifully together. It is really, and we're not, running, $1 million campaigns to talk about externally, but it really it just united and created the framework for everything we're doing that makes sense, and that kind of provides us a reminder for everybody why we're here, why we're enjoying our jobs. So they work beautifully together.
No, you're right, and as I say, I'm a big fan, and I hope that we'll be talking about this a lot more. The time is going so quickly, but let me ask one question, because I can't resist. Because I'd hate to lose an opportunity to ask you about this. I do recall that you were very much involved with Wharton's Future of Advertising initiative. So I know that what's down the road, just like Eyes of Tomorrow, or is always something very, very much on your mind. Any final words, any advice for what you see ahead for the business of marketing?
Continued challenges, and yes, I remember when I became member of the Future of Advertising program, which I think is now almost 10 years ago, was in 2013. We asked ourselves, those questions have only magnified themselves and become bigger and wider. I think I see 4 areas that I would kind of personally write on my to-do list and not to lose sight of. One is the continuing fluidity of the media landscape. It's not about above the line, below the line digital anymore. It is fully integrated, automated. How do you make sure that you get to your consumer in the most relevant way without losing sight, without becoming, obnoxious and annoying, or wasting money on messaging that doesn't reach anybody? That continues to be a challenge. And this is what I mentioned before, making sure we have the talent that can keep up with that. And make the right choices, particularly for a smaller company that doesn't necessarily, our media department is one person, so we need to make sure that we are catching up with this and we're on top of everything. Number 2 is that's actually linked to both the B2C, but more even to the B2B, which is the expectations of our customers with regards to frictionless and interactions. we're spoiled as consumers because they're world-class companies that provide us with incredible omni-channel solutions. I can, even drop a shopping cart on my phone and continue on my iPad and do it, over the phone, etc. And, again, for smaller companies, you need to make sure you have the right infrastructure in place. You have the right, make sure your legacy, being held down by legacy systems, the investments, that is sometimes a challenge. But so creating those interactions is certainly something that is, I think, only magnifying. And with every new technology and leap in that other companies are providing, we need to make sure we're catching up. The third one I would say is in, call it virtualization. So I'm just spending a lot of time right now to understand what does it mean for us personally, like as a company. What does the metaverse mean? How do we need to engage in NFTs, blockchain, etc.? To give you very simple examples, most of our licensing contracts don't even include digital virtual spaces, because this industry for how many tens of years, we make physical frames. So if somebody then wants to create a frame, an eyewear or a sunglass in the virtual space, who owns that? And what are the revenue streams coming into this? So if I want to give you, an ideal world, I want you to buy a sunglass and get the virtual sunglass at the same time. So I'm spending a lot of time with lawyers right now to understand, how we can create this and also get to agreements with some of our licensors. And then really, what does metaverse mean, both in the general consumer engagement, but also, for instance, in something we're looking at right now is in training opportunities for our own staff. Can that play a role, and how do we leverage the best? And then the last piece is, which is kind of linked to the purpose and the sustainability piece, is there's an even greater need for transparency and trust in companies. And again, the benefit of being a smaller company, maybe you're not out, you're somewhat under the radar screen for many, but certainly we're asking us the same questions. How do we connect and interact in the most authentic way with our different stakeholders? Definitely the sustainability piece helps us, but these are questions like, for instance, when we're asked about our business in Russia and Belarus, and questions like this: how do we track our consumers? How do we track our interactions with our B2B customers? This is, again, one of those areas that we already talked about 10 years ago, and we'll be talking still in 10 years. And as a marketer, you have to just keep up with it and make sure you make the right choices.
Yeah, and with both the pace of change and, I guess, dare I say, with so many sustained crises, whether they're going from pandemics to economic situations to wartime situations to shortages to supply chains. There was a time when we could stick to business, and now that business, is global, and sometimes that business is also political. So there's a lot on a marketer's plate, which I think you have shared admirably. And I have a feeling that we're going to be talking a lot more, but I must thank you for your honesty, for sharing so much, and really enlightening us on so many areas in terms of both being a champion for working within a mid-sized organization, but also how wonderfully said, a champion for sustainability and purpose and the unity that can give an organization. So thank you, and I hope you join us again.
Thank you, Deborah. You're welcome.
The Internationalist focuses on the continual reinvention of marketing by highlighting inspirational marketers around the world and their ideas as they move the industry forward. Internationalist Marketing TV shares these perspectives through interviews and personal stories.